Our next guest is directing a different spotlight on the opportunities available to today's professional musician. Tim Page of the New York Times called Dr. Jill Timmons a sensitive musician. Her playing is graceful, lyrical, detailed, and intimate. Filmmaker Ken Burns selected music from her Amy Beach recording for his documentary on PBS called The War. In a career guidebook from Oxford University Press called The Musician's Journey, Crafting Your Career Vision and Plan, she offers what Scott McBride Smith called a wealth of practical strategies. Please join us in welcoming recording artist, educator, international consultant, and author, Dr. Jill Timmons. Dr. Timmons, thank you for talking with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
If you look at 2014 and compare it to 10 years ago, does the professional musician have more or fewer choices than 10 years ago?
Oh, I think I can't answer this with precise statistics, but my sense is in working in this field that there are more. And if we look at just one track, and that is public school education, K through 12, and the kinds of cuts that have occurred across the country in the last 10 years, just that field alone has expanded vastly for musicians. And the reason it has, in fact, I have several clients who are just out cleaning up, music programs have been diminished. And yet when you look at many of the state educational benchmarks, arts competency is listed in there as a graduation requirement. Well, you can't continue to downsize your program or eventually eliminate your music professionals and still fulfill the benchmarks. And in fact, there may be some legal implications for that. I can imagine a parent saying, wait a minute, the benchmark says this and you didn't give that to me. So what school districts are doing are hiring arts specialists for extended residencies. And while I wholeheartedly support the hiring of full-time music professionals, the idea of resident artists is also very compelling. You have somebody coming in for 2 or 3 weeks to do an intensive for your school in that area of art. And for music people, that includes a whole host of materials, residency guides, experiential learning, making music, making instruments, and depending on the level, K through 12. So artists are desperately needed. Musicians are needed to go out there and fulfill these residencies to meet the challenge of these severe cuts. The thing I like about this idea is that these resident artists also connect with communities, because most of these residencies include a community performance. And so you become, as the resident performing artist, a bridge between the K through 12 environment and your local community.
As I look at some of the audience and the opportunities or decisions or that proverbial fork in the road, if I were listening to this as a senior in high school or a freshman starting in the declaration of a college major, what advice would you give me?
As a college music major, the most important advice that I gave my own students when I was in higher education and what I give today when I'm a resident instructor is to think deeply from day one about yourself and what excites you about music. Explore any classes that you can insert into your schedule that speak to your interests. Follow the thread of something that you've always wanted to study. Talk to all your professors, especially those academics who have one foot in the professional world. And I mean those faculty members who are out performing, doing their art away from campus, because they've got a foot in the professional world and will be able to give you some significant advice about what real-world things are going on.
As we talk about putting one of these plans in play, making that decision and the rubber hitting the road, moving from plan versus income and making it happen and making it work. You cite a sentence here in your book that says, I believe that most of us work successfully in the arts, not with one institutional job, but by developing streams of income. How does this kind of fit into the big picture?
Well, this is at the heart of being an entrepreneur. It's not that we exclude the possibility of one job, and I'll use myself as an example. I was at Linfield College for many, many years. That was my main job. But within my career, I had other jobs around that. As a performing artist, I worked through the NEA for many years. I worked as a consultant, just lots and lots of different aspects to my career in terms of jobs. So when somebody is thinking about that step past professional training, it's important, I think, to hold a number of paradoxes, if you will. Yes, you might land some kind of full-time job that you really like, and that becomes the bulk of your working hour time, but that's not your career. You may also develop what I call streams of income, which may be that I'll give you an example with one of my clients. She has a very successful piano studio. She's a touring artist. She's an educational specialist. She's one of those people going around the country providing educational residencies. She's a writer, and she's currently developing a new edition of an underserved composer. So she has lots of different things going on, each of which are income producing.
Jill, in your chapter called A Call to Change, you had a couple of interesting examples about the artist that's experienced getting their hand burned on their way to realizing their dream. You had a prescription. Could you share that with us?
Well, I think it's a very kind of large, open-ended question, and you can't be in the music industry for very long without having some experience of disappointment. Some of us, we go out, we enter a competition, we don't win. We audition for a scholarship, we don't get that. The thing is, if you talk to people who've been in the business for a long, long time, they just get back on the horse. They try to learn from their experiences. They try to hone down more closely what it is they want to do, and they find the necessary training and experience to become very good at what they want to do. I think it's a kind of psychological hardiness that one requires in this industry, and to put those disappointing experiences behind oneself and to step forward and move forward, but using those experiences as opportunities for further self-discovery and excellence.
You have put down here the price of admission for higher education. You've certainly had a lot of experience in that arena. What is the price of admission? Well,
the first price is 99% of the time the doctorate. And this is fairly recent in our history. 30, 40 years ago, if you were an extraordinary performing artist, your academic credentials were really secondary to that. If you think about the development, one of the great music training institutions in this country today, in Indiana University, in the 60s, when they developed that roster of extraordinary performing artists, Joseph Gingold, George Shevak, who was my teacher, and Janos Starker, none of these people had doctorates or graduate degrees for that matter, but of course they were the gold standard. So the challenge we're facing today is that there's such a large number of people wanting to work in higher education, and there have been so many cuts across the board in higher ed, that administrators at the very top of these institutions can require that artists have what we call the terminal degree, and in music that's the doctorate, because it speaks to their trustees and their constituents when you can say, oh, my college or university or conservatory has a 95% rate of doctoral professors. So I'm not arguing whether or not that's appropriate. It is what is. So people who want to work in the music profession within the confines of academia are probably going to have to get that terminal degree. And that's an investment of time, energy, and money. And so you have to weigh the cost benefit. If you have a passion for working with young people, if you like collaboration with other musicians, but you will be essentially married to them in the music department once you get tenure. If you like a kind of home base, much in the way that Haydn had at Esterhazy, then higher education can be a great place.
Today, as a music instructor, either at the local level, as a university teacher, K through 12 music teacher, what advice should I be giving my students?
Well, those are all different markets. Of course, K through 12 requires licensure. You have to have the degree and be licensed within the state that you want to work, and that's a whole separate track. And if I had a college student, for instance, who was interested in that track, I would encourage them to go and speak to their music education advisor at the college level, who will be networked into the state and to the local school districts. Again, if somebody's interested in teaching in the field of higher education, then you've got that journey with the doctorate. But the good news is that because of our marvelous online world, there are a number of very rigorous doctoral programs available online, which you have a limited period of time in residency. For instance, there's one through Columbia University. Boston University has a superb doctoral program in music where you can hold down another job or be living in a certain locale, do most of the work online, and then do periodic residencies for short spans of time. So, again, you want to find out who your best conduit is into that career advising.
Jill, is the advice the same for me with an interest in moving into being an indie artist?
Oh, that's a wonderful question because that's close to home for me. My daughter is in that business, works for Warp Records in New York. I think that one of the ways to connect in the music industry in general, outside of some of the places that we've discussed, is to get your hands on an opportunity either through volunteering or a paid internship or some part-time work directly in the field. And I do talk about this quite a bit in the book, that through volunteering or through internships, and this is something to think about in college and during your training, you make direct contact with people who are in the profession. And if you go in and you do a great job in whatever way you connect with them, and you show that you're interested in the field and that you're someone to be counted on, I always advise my clients in those situations, become indispensable. That when there's an opening, you're the one who's on the ground. Certainly, applying to jobs that come open, shopping your resume around, making those informational interviews, those are very important too. Being online, looking around for what's opening up in the profession. But there's nothing like the personal contact, because when you think about it, on the other side of the fence, those people who are out hiring, they want to hire somebody who has a great attitude, who has experience, who's interested, and who works hard. Because once you hire somebody, it's very difficult to get rid of them if it doesn't work out. So employers are on the lookout for just the right fit. And if you come into that organization, either through the volunteer sector or as an internship, and you have become indispensable, you raise the chances of you getting a job there exponentially.
Jill, beyond the stage advice that you've included in this book, where do you typically point clients or people that you meet at lectures to learn more about where to get a start with any of these changes in career and professional opportunities?
Well, I think one of the key factors is to first be able to identify where you are on this vision plan continuum. Do I know what I want? And I've known for years, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, but I don't have an idea of what I need to do. Well, then you need some help with the plan part. Maybe you've got everything going, but you need to find your way in terms of marketing. Identifying where you are on that continuum is the first step. One of the things that I have attempted to do in my bibliography, which is huge, it's a giant bibliography, because there are lots of resources in there about these specific issues. There's even a book in there on how to write a business plan and your own mission statement, something as specific as that. One of the main things that I mention to my clients, though, it's an Oscar Wilde quote, which I love. It's, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken."
Excellent. Jill, you'll be visiting the Seattle area soon. Tell us a little bit about your visit and how people can get in touch with you.
Well, I'm very pleased to have been invited to do a presentation for Yamaha pianos and classic pianos in the Seattle Bellevue area, and it will be a morning of conversation, presentation, and fellowship, and celebrating Yamaha's new CFX fantastic concert grand. And so on the morning of October 17th, there'll be a free breakfast and a short presentation on the piano itself, and then I'll be speaking about something very specific that is targeted towards the teachers who will be attending, and that is teaching issues around the high school student who wants to go on in the profession. So it does touch on my book. And as a kind of example of that, two of my students who have just won a contest as a two-piano team will be playing a short program, and I'll be using them as kind of an example in my lecture. And then there'll be a short book signing and a conversation period following that.
Jill, thanks for joining us today to share a little bit of some of the wealth of information that's available in your book. We look forward to learning more and following some of the exciting information that you have available for us.
Well, thank you very much, Rodney, for this delightful conversation. It was my pleasure.